I wanted to give my testimony of how I was violated as a child from a male and a female, because this is the month where it is awareness month, and I'm not going to say the words because they will censor my video out. And I was 5 years old when I had experienced this with a male. This was at the time my mom's boyfriend. It was him and I and my little brother in the room, and it was real late at night. I remember my mom being passed out at the time on the couch. She has a history, of addiction and things like that. I remember the act. I'm not going to go into details about the act itself, but I just remember feeling very numb. So I didn't really feel pain during that time. I remember feeling as if I had left my body, as if I was like standing there watching this man do this to me. I remember even trying to call out my mom's name, but nothing was like coming out of my mouth. It was like I was like, but nothing was coming out of my mouth. And I remember afterwards, I had got out of the bed and I just went to my mom and laid down on the couch with her. And I remember he came out totally disrobed and, patted me on my head and asked, was I okay? And I'm like, yeah. I did not start having memories about this until I believe I was well in my teenage years, where I started having flashbacks. And I was having flashbacks a lot. Something, again, that I never would talk about. I kind of just would, what would replay the most would be him leaving the room, patting me on my head. When I encountered this act two with a female, this went on for like many years. And this was more of, I was being told what to do to please this person. And at the time, it was always told, not to say anything, to keep it between us. And actually, it became normal. It became normal from about 5 to 12 years old, where this was something that me and this girl went off and did. And nothing was ever done to me, but I was always told, what to do to please this person at the time. And being told as a child, not to say nothing, you're not saying anything. It was never really asking me either as a child if any of these things was ever going on, or, if anything has ever happened to me like that as a kid. Those conversations were never had. When I was a kid, I didn't know that during certain times with me and this female, their menstrual was on, right? I was a kid. And I was still performing these acts on this female. And I didn't know that until I became older and had experienced a menstrual on my own. That might be a little graphic, but hey, it's my testimony. It's really what I had experienced as a child. And I did not tell anybody in my family. Well, I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell nobody, actually, until I was about 22, 23. I remember I was at the shelter, and the counselor there actually did a presentation on if that had ever occurred to you in your life or even as a child. Got to the last slide, and she had it was like a list of all these different symptoms that a person could experience or that a person could do. And I had identified with every single one of them, except for like one. I don't remember what the one was, but I do remember, harming myself. I remember that a lot. I remember times, especially at my mother's house, I could be so enraged at times that I used to tear my entire room up. I would just like throw everything around, or I would break stuff at the time. And nobody really knew what I was going through internally, right? I'm doing a lot of these things outwardly, but nobody really knew why and what I was actually going through internally. I remember after that presentation was done, and the lady was like, if you ever, if you feel like you want to talk to somebody about it, you can always talk to me. That was the first time in my life where I was like, I need to talk to somebody, about what happened to me as a child. Because again, I never told anybody. And I did a few sessions with her. I remember I was going to her every week, and it was hard because we had to talk about things. I had to remember it. And it was hard. This was definitely, as it's called, this cognitive behavioral therapy. I did that for 8 months straight. And I hated it, to be honest. I hated it, but I kept going back because I knew well, I was able to now bridge the gap between why I was acting out at certain times and where it actually stemmed from. So she helped me to bring it all together in full circle. I remember I think the first few sessions, she was like, Bianca, when you talk about this, she was like, you talk about this as if you are explaining this story for somebody else. Like you're telling somebody else's story. And she kind of wanted me to like really take it, like own my story and not be afraid to talk about it. And that was hard too, because I was always met with uncomfortable feelings and memories at times. But I had got through it. I worked through it every session. I got through it. I grieved, there was a lot of grieving that I had to go through, but I got through it. And I finally told my parents what happened. And I did not tell them both at the same time. I think I told my father first. Yeah, I told my father first. And my mother, I waited to kind of tell her because I waited to tell her. Matter of fact, I told myself I wasn't going to actually tell her. I didn't want to tell her. She's not good with bad news, but I didn't want to tell her. Until literally one day she was on the phone with a friend of hers and she was talking about him, this ex. And I remember thinking, at the time, all these years I had thought something had happened to him. He passed away or something. Not that I ever wanted to talk to him, because I would never want to see him again in my life. I never would have wanted to sit down, and talk to him about what had happened. Just wasn't something I wanted to do for as part of my healing. Everybody has their own choice, but it wasn't something that I wanted to do. But anyway, she was in a room talking about him, and I, instantly was like, I need to tell her. Like, because for one, I didn't even know she still had any contact with him. And I don't know if she's ever said anything to him about it. I do know he's not here anymore. He wound up falling over drunk and going on, leaving this earth. Let's just say that. But anyway, I remember telling her, and that was difficult too. That was difficult to have to share that with my parents, because I love my parents, right? And I know that they did the best that they could do by raising me, but I had to tell them, because at the time I felt like I just felt like it was important for them to know. And not only that, I think it also helped them to kind of understand me too, especially my father. I will say my father, more than anybody, was like, I think it gave him a lot of clarity, because my father raised me majority of the time more than anybody else. And I know for him, I think it gave him a lot of clarity of like exactly, what I was going through and what I was actually experiencing in my life. But yeah, that was my experience. I do plan on sharing more, about like why nothing was ever said to my parents, and a lot of the behaviors that I was displaying. I definitely want to go into that in another video. But if you are somebody who has ever experienced this, listen, it's not your fault. I don't care what age you were. I don't care what age the people were and you had experienced this. I just want to tell you it was not your fault. And if you have not done so yet, I pray that you too will take the time to talk to somebody about it. And if you feel like maybe you need to let your family and friends know, do that. But don't ever feel like you got to continue to suffer in silence with this thing on your own.